Welcome back to the Career Profiles podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and this is part 3 of the Mike Tyson Career Profile. If you haven't yet listened to parts 1 and 2, please do go and listen to those first. We do cover Mike's early beginnings in part 1, leading into his amateur career, and in part 2, an extensive look into his amateur career and how things were before he turns professional. Part 3, we're now at a point where he has turned professional, and we're going to talk about his professional career. We're going to share the stories of what was going on behind the scenes, and we're going to lead all the way up to the point where he gets ready for his first world title challenge. Now, before I get into the episode, I just want to say thank you for all the comments that we've had over parts 1 and 2 on Spotify and via various different channels. Thank you so much for sending the comments over. Really appreciate that. For those that have been listening via Patreon, thank you so much for subscribing via Patreon, and I hope you've enjoyed early access to this episode as well as the others. And for those that have been commenting on social media, again, thank you so much for that. If you haven't already found us on social media, you can do it BTR Boxing Podcast, and you can also find our podcast available on all good podcasting platforms. So, without further ado, I'm going to get back into the Mike Tyson Career Profile. And as we left it at the end of part 2, we left it at a point where he's done everything that is physically possible to get himself ready for his professional career. The master plan between Mike Tyson, Cus D'Amato, Kevin Rooney was all put together. It was all ready to go. There was nothing else from an amateur perspective that he could do. He failed to get to the Olympics. That was his dream. He couldn't get there. He was beaten by Henry Tillman. So as a result, Cus D'Amato decided he didn't want to keep him around in the amateurs any longer, and it was time to get him into the professional side of the sport. So Mike's professional debut was scheduled for December the 7th against John Singleton. Mike was working feverishly in the gym, determined to make his debut a speedy and successful one. Kevin Rooney liked what he saw during the workouts, and he said, "From the very first day he's been here, we've trained him as a professional. His brawling, hard-punching style is much more suited to the pros, and perhaps that cost him a couple of fights in the amateurs. He's excited, and he's anxious to turn professional. He wants to get his career started." On Wednesday, November the 29th, Mike bruised his left hand in the gym. It was the same hand he had injured during the European Championships, and the damage was apparently from the same incident. It wasn't a new injury. This caused some consternation in the Tyson camp and resulted in a quick appointment to see a specialist in New York City. Cus D'Amato accompanied the worried Mike to the doctor's office. "It's only a slight bruise," he said, "but we don't want to take any chances, so we're having it looked at by a specialist. I should know the test results by Thursday or Friday." The results of the examination were not as optimistic as Cus had hoped. Mike had apparently suffered a torn ligament in Helsinki and had aggravated the problem 5 weeks later in Catskill. So his original scheduled date in December didn't happen, and on January the 3rd, Cus and Mike journeyed to New York City to have Mike's huge left hand examined by several orthopedic surgeons. To everyone's relief, Mike passed the test with flying colours. He received a clean bill of health and was given permission to resume a full training regime. Needless to say, Mike was overjoyed at the news, as were his 2 trainers, and the 3 of them were anxious to return to Catskill to put Mike's career back on track. While they were in New York City, Cus arranged to visit his good friend, Dr. John Halpin, whose office was nearby at West 72nd Street, across from Central Park. Dr. Halpin and Cus put Mike through one of their hypnosis sessions to get him in the right mental frame of mind for his pro debut. The procedure was pretty much the same each time they sat down together. Dr. Halpin would hypnotise Mike, and then Cus would take over, quickly pointing out Mike's weaknesses and explaining to the boy how he could turn those weaknesses into strengths. Hypnosis, when used properly, can be an effective tool in helping a person overcome weaknesses and bad habits. In order for the procedure to work, however, the subject must be willing and receptive. Mike and Dr. Halpin had an ideal subject to work on. Mike wanted to win the heavyweight championship of the world so badly, he was willing to try almost anything, even hypnosis, in order to achieve his objective. The next day, at the Catskill Boxing Club, Mike was turned loose on the boxing world once again, causing the Tyson triumvirate of D'Amato, Jacobs and Caton to convene an emergency meeting of the management committee in New York. It was time to review the final strategy in Mike's development program. the steps that would be necessary to propel him to the World Championship in the shortest time possible. The first step was to remove Mike from Catskill High School and hand him over to a personal tutor. This allowed him to schedule his training program more effectively and conveniently. It turned out to be an easy decision. Mike had never been able to properly adjust completely to the small-town school environment, nor was he able to overcome his feeling of inadequacy when it came to his reading and writing skills. He was still taunted by the school bullies, who took advantage of the fact that Mike was a boxer, and as such, would not fight back, even though he was twice the size. Mike's training was in high gear by mid-month, and Cus had his scouts beating the bushes for a new batch of sparring partners. As soon as likely candidates were found, they were herded back to the Catskill and met at a cost of $60 a day. Cus found it necessary to recruit opponents in bunches because they seldom last more than 2 weeks with the hard-hitting Mike Tyson. His thundering body shots quickly took their toll on his less talented opponents. January then turned into February, and the Tyson Express moved inexorably ahead. Mike, an intense student of the fight game, trained with complete dedication, often jogging the 3 miles from his home near Athens to Redmond's Hall, prior to his 2-hour daily workout. Sparring partners came and went like a 50-cent lunch. Some of them hardly stayed long enough to earn travel money home, and none of them were able to stand up to Mike's sledgehammer blows for long. Their names appeared like blurs in the gymnasium. Nate Robinson, Kenny Davis, Ernie Barr and Jimmy Young. Some of these men were almost very capable fighters. They were just overmatched when they stepped into the ring with Mike, as almost any fighter would have been at that point. Cus did obtain the services of one world-class boxer for a few days when the WBC Cruiserweight champion, Carlos De Leon, returned to Catskill. 6 minutes in the ring with the classy De Leon made Mike realise what it was like to fight a real pro. De Leon took a young Tyson to school, so to speak, but Mike learned his lessons quickly. He marvelled at De Leon's ring savvy and relished the mental exercise of trying to outthink his crafty foe. Mike made his share of amateurish mistakes, but he was never guilty of the same mistake twice. Cus D'Amato, his astute trainer, was in his usual position on the ring apron, studying his young phenom very carefully and yelling occasional instructions to him in an attempt to eliminate his bad habits. "Don't be stationary, keep moving your head, and keep your hands up," he said. Another capable sparring partner followed De Leon into town. Tyrone Armstrong, the Philadelphia strong boy, returned after completing a sparring session with Pinkland Thomas. Armstrong boxed 3 rounds with Mike and came away highly impressed. He said, "The boy hits real hard, harder than Thomas. He has great balance and leverage, that's why his punches hurt so much. I haven't seen anybody in the division that can beat him." Jim Jacobs and Cus D'Amato continued to search for a capable opponent for Mike's professional debut, without success. Cus wants an opponent for Mike who's going to come forward and fight. Mike needs strong opponents in order to develop. If his opponent is a bum, then everyone gets cheated, and Mike gets cheated. Cus said, "We're looking forward to a tough match." Within a week, a suitable opponent had been signed to a contract. He was a 19-year-old Puerto Rican named Hector Mercedes, another recent entrant into the professional ranks. Mercedes, whose 0-2-1 record seemed made to order for the ambitious Mike, had the reputation of being a tough kid as well. He had compiled an impressive amateur record around his hometown, but he had never fought anyone of Mike's caliber. Cus knew this kid was a mixer, but he was bothered by Mercedes' lack of height. Although Hector weighed a solid 204 pounds, he stood only 5'7" tall, and Mike would tower over him in the ring. Cus realised that if Mike beat Mercedes badly, the crowd would think of him as a bully picking on little guys. Cus tried to rationalise the selection of Mercedes for his own peace of mind. Lorraine Miller promoted 15 Mike Tyson fights, including his pro debut. And before the Mercedes match, Miller showed some posters to D'Amato, who growled, "Tyson's picture's too small." So Miller immediately ordered new posters and used her stack of 300 original posters to kindle firewood. In later years, she received calls from memorabilia buffs, looking for those 300 pictures. Back in the gym again, Mike put the finishing touches on his conditioning program. He sparred with a young fighter named Charles Thurman, an amateur who was training for the finals of the New York State Golden Glove tournament. Thurman caved in quickly under Mike's constant barrage, however, calling it quits midway through the second round. On March the 6th, and the moment of truth had finally arrived, the final countdown began at approximately 5:30 p.m. as the light-coloured station wagon pulled away from the homestead, its headlights searching for a path through the late winter darkness. The rapid acceleration of the rear wheel against the gravel road sent clouds of brown dirt billowing skyward as Don Shanagar pulled out onto Route 385 with his entourage of Cus D'Amato, Mike Tyson, and Kevin Rooney. Within minutes, they were on the New York Thruway, heading north for Albany for the convention centre and for Tyson's appointment with Destiny. Mike walked through the front door of the Albany Convention Centre, unnoticed, at about 6:30, wearing an old, beat-up brown leather jacket and carrying a cloth gym bag. He immediately headed to the locker room to get himself mentally prepared for the conflict ahead. That in itself was a major feat because the locker room in the convention centre was also the men's lavatory. The small, cramped room had been outfitted with temporary lockers and benches to accommodate the boxers, but it was still open to the public, so the fighters constantly had to sidestep rushing male patrons in need of the facilities. Outside the arena, several hundred early arrivals, unaware that they were about to witness history in the making, milled about, drinking beer and scarfing down hot dogs. Some of them tried to kill time by watching the inept performances in the ring. These preliminary fighters were, in general, a sad and often tragic lot. They sweated and bled and risked their health for pennies. The 4-round prelim boys made about $250, out of which they had to pay their expenses, such as equipment, trainers' fees and managers' fees. If they ended up with $50 for themselves, they were lucky. 6-round fighters pulled in $350, and 8-round boys drew the exorbitant sum of $750. 99% of these club fighters would wind up broke, many of them punchy. Most club fighters never even knew the names of the men who taped their hands before the fight. Fewer than 1% of them escaped from the hellholes of the small, smoke-filled arenas and went on to a successful career in the ring. Mike would of course be one of the lucky ones. Cus D'Amato talked to him incessantly, reminding him about the need to control his fear, remain calm and be aggressive. He said, "Remember what I taught you. If you do everything you learned in the gym, you will win." Mike dropped down on the hard wooden bench and began lacing up his shoes as fight time drew near. At 7:40, assistant trainer Matt Baranski came over to help Mike adjust his protective belt, and a few minutes later, Cus eased down on the bench next to his edgy fire and began wrapping his valuable hands with gauze, 18 feet of soft white gauze. Cus then applied a few strips of tape to each hand, being careful not to let the tape get over Mike's knuckles, a practice that was frowned upon by the State Boxing Commission. When the taping process was completed, Mike clenched his hands into his fists, making sure they felt comfortable and were well protected. Now the young warrior was ready to go. He rose slowly from the bench and flexed his muscles, then returned to his shadow boxing to keep warm. He was attired in white trunks and black shoes. No socks, no robe, no flashy accoutrements, just the bare essentials. Tyson said it made him feel more like a gladiator to be dressed like this, remembering that the combatants in ancient Roman gladiatorial battles entered the Colosseum clothed only in loincloths and sandals. It was now only minutes to fight time, and the locker room reverberated with the blare of rock music as Tyson increased the intensity of his warm-up routine in an effort to get himself well loosened up before heading to the ring. He was bobbing and weaving, slipping imaginary punches, and occasionally shooting out sharp jabs with his left hand to the face of an invisible foe. Sometimes the jab was followed by more bobbing and weaving. The door opened, and a wizened head peered in, a cigarette butt protruding from between 2 rows of rotten teeth. "They're ready for you now." Cus cast a concerned glance at his restless fighter and gently patted him on the shoulder. "Okay, let's go, Mike." The parade left the locker room and headed for the ring, assistant trainer Matt Baranski in the lead, followed by Mike and Cus D'Amato. Jim Jacobs, D'Amato's partner and co-manager, lagged behind to view the proceedings from the top of the steps, wondering what the fates had in store for this boy. Mike had been preparing for this night for 5 years, and he would be a power to be reckoned with in the heavyweight division if Jacobs and D'Amato were any judges of people. Mike was an impressive talent, and Jacobs was getting positive vibes about the entire venture. He was confident that the venture would be successful. Matt Baranski lifted the second strand of rope, and Mike slipped deftly into the ring to a loud round of applause. Even though this was Mike's first pro fight, He was well known around the Albany area thanks to his exciting amateur career. His popularity was such that the convention centre was almost filled with over 2,500 Tyson fans in attendance, all of them thirsting for blood. Hector Mercedes, attired in red trunks with a white stripe, waited in the ring. He eyed Mike curiously, wondering why everyone was making such a fuss over a big kid with no pro fights under his belt. Mike had come a long way in the past 4 years, both technically and emotionally. He was no longer the excitable kid who rolled around the ring ecstatically in Colorado Springs after winning a fight. He'd matured considerably, but he was, after all, still only 18 years old, and just a boy, albeit a boy in a man's body. Mike could feel the butterflies squirming deep within, and his stomach muscles were knotted up with the tension of the moment. He stood in his corner anxiously waiting for the start of the festivities. At the sound of the bell, he sprang straight at Mercedes, driving the little man to the ropes. He flailed away viciously with both hands, reminiscent of his first smoke about 4 years before. The unexpected activity in the ring brought oohs and ahs from the crowd. 2 men who were catching a few winks in the front row suddenly bolted upright and directed their attention to the ferocity above them. Several stragglers on the way to the concession stand turned back to watch the action. Tyson was a good student and had mastered his lessons well. He remembered D'Amato's instructions, the floating rib on the left side and the liver on the right side. A sharp left crashed against Mercedes' liver, and 2 pulverizing rights found the targeted ribcage. Mercedes winced in an obvious discomfort and tried to cover up. Tyson backed off momentarily and then came back with a right uppercut that straightened the Puerto Rican up like a pole. One last left hook dug deep into Mercedes' side. All the air seemed to leave his body with a hiss as he sank to one knee in the corner. The referee stopped the fight at 1 minute and 47 seconds of round 1. It was an electrifying start to Mike Tyson's career, and he brought the crowd to their feet, cheering and screaming. Mike would give them more of the same in months to come, much more. But for now, the battle was over, and the young gladiator basked in the glory of his first professional victory. When asked about his strategy for the fight, Tyson replied, "I just wanted to throw a lot of punches to confuse him." Obviously, the strategy worked. Cus D'Amato was pleased with his boy's initial showing and couldn't resist gloating a little bit. He said, "He looked good, didn't he?" The old man's eyes twinkled as he thought about it. Jim Jacobs was also impressed by what he saw in the ring. He said, "The other fellow fought back. He threw good punches. If Mike wasn't so elusive, he would have got hit. Prior to this fight, I thought Mike was a spectacular fighter. Nothing that happened tonight altered my feeling. Mike is an irresistible force." Cus D'Amato nodded in agreement. Mike was at a disadvantage in the amateurs. For example, if he knocked someone down in the amateurs, the opponent would take a 9 count, then could get even in the scoring by landing a punch, though not nearly so damaging. The professional ranks are marvellous for Mike. The score for aggressiveness. I expect Mike to break Patterson's record. Tyson echoed his manager's optimism. He said, "I fought all the best fighters in the world as an amateur. I fought the better fighters at a younger age. I have reason to be confident." The public's first glimpse of Mike was an awesome one. He left Hector Mercedes in a bloody heap less than 2 minutes. The old household celebrated Mike's victory with a lot of noise and raucous laughter into the wee hours of the morning. It was a moment to cherish and remember on the banks of the Hudson. Cus D'Amato, however, was more restrained than the rest of the family. He realised that Mike was still essentially an undeveloped raw talent. A tremendous amount of work remained if Mike Tyson was to become a world-class fighter capable of winning a championship before he was 22 years of age. The next morning at breakfast, the KGO trainer brought his charge back to the real world. Tyson was still on cloud 9 after his short and explosive night's work. His decisive victory made him feel invincible, but Cus soon made him face the reality of the situation. He said, "Feeling pretty cocky? Think you're tough, don't you? Unbeatable? Well, let me tell you, you're not. Oh, you did good, all right, and you deserved a quick knockout, but you made a lot of mistakes too. If you'd fought an experienced fighter last night, he would have killed you. You were too excitable, too wild. You fought out of control. A good fighter would have laid back and picked you apart. You've got to stay calm so you can think out there. Champions are always calm, and that's what you've got to learn. You did a good job in your first fight, but we've got to go back to the gym and work on your ring discipline." These morning after the night before discussions were to become a regular part of Mike Tyson's boxing regime, and a part that he always dreaded. No matter how good he would do in a fight, Cus would always find some mistakes he'd made. Cus wanted to drill into Mike's mind the fact that he would never be perfect, could never be perfect. He wanted Mike to realise that no one is perfect. No one should ever get cocky and think they're invincible. There is always something more that can be learned. When a person stops learning and begins to believe that he is unbeatable, that's when he becomes vulnerable. Mike had one pro bout under his belt, and Cus was ready to unveil his newest strategy. He would make Mike Tyson the busiest fighter in the United States with a scheduled match every 2 weeks. Cus believed that the old fighters had the right idea. You had to fight often to stay on top of your game. The more you fought, the better you got. The great fighters of yesteryear, men like Sugar Ray Robinson, Archie Moore and Willie Pep, all had over 200 professional fights before they hung up the gloves for good. Cus had a dream, to make Mike Tyson the youngest heavyweight champion in history, and to accomplish that feat, he decided to spoon-feed the young lion with a non-stop diet of boxing matches in order to force his protege to develop his almost unlimited talents faster than anyone had ever done before. Mike's second fight arrived in the blink of an eye, only 35 days after his first fight. It was once again held in the convention centre in Albany, the second of the 3 fights contracted with the Tri-State Promotions. The opponent was a tall black man named Trent Singleton, and if you bent down to tie your shoelace after the fight started, you might not have seen Singleton in action at all. When the bell sounded for round 1, Singleton threw a feeble left into Tyson's direction, but Mike slipped it very easily. And that was it as far as Singleton's offense was concerned. Mike countered with a hard left that put Singleton on the seat of his pants with a surprised look on his face. A flurry of rights and lefts by the excited Catskill bomber dropped Singleton twice more in less than a whisper, automatically stopping the fight. It had lasted only 57 seconds, hardly enough time for Mike to work up a sweat. He had a tougher workout in the locker room before coming to the ring. During the interview session after the fight, one of the reporters congratulated Cus D'Amato. 5 days after Mike's second victory, one of the greatest middleweight fights of all time took place in Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada, before a sellout crowd of over 15,000 people. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, a future ring immortal, defended his title against Thomas the Hitman Hearns, one of the hardest punchers in the game. The action was fast and furious from the outset, as Hearns was determined to establish his dominance over the champion. Mike watched the fight on closed-circuit television with considerable interest. Mike was an avid student of the sport, and he studied every match carefully, always analysing, always learning. He learned a lot about heart during that fight from both corners. As Mike's professional career was launched, his personal life started to settle down and gain stability. He felt more comfortable now around Cus and Camille, and he began to consider them family rather than acquaintances. The time spent with Cus grew into a true father-son relationship instead of trainer-fighter relationship. Camille became someone that Mike could go to with his problems and with his doubts, someone from whom he could receive the solace that he so desperately needed. The Ewald house had grown into a home for Mike Tyson during the spring of 1985. It was no longer just a place to live. On the day that Mike learned the identity of his next opponent for his third professional fight, a new sparring partner arrived on the scene. His name was Tom Sullivan, a native of Indiana and a veteran of 29 professional fights. It would be Sullivan's job to get Mike ready to mix it up with Don Halpin, a journeyman fighter from Massachusetts. Halpin, with an undistinguished record of 9-17, had the reputation of being a survivor, a gutsy kid who could give an opponent a hard time and take a fight to its completion. Kevin Rooney was familiar with Halpin's record. He said, "He's been around. He's an old warhorse. He looks to be an experienced fighter." It was obvious that Rooney was anticipating a tough struggle for his boy, one that Mike badly needed. Obviously, you don't learn much from fighting pushovers. Don Halpin had been in the ring with some proven adversaries. The day before the Halpin fight, a local press conference was held to stimulate interest in the event. During the question and answer period, one of the Channel 10 reporters noted that Halpin hadn't fought in over 13 months. But Halpin shrugged off any inference that the inactivity might affect his performance. He said, "I haven't been the most active fighter in terms of bouts per year, but the time off has never hurt before. I've always come back strong." Mike was more relaxed at the press conference this time, and he exuded an air of increased confidence now that he got 2 pro fights under his belt. He said, "I'm sure of a victory. If it goes 6 rounds, I'll beat him in 6 rounds and look good doing it. Whatever it takes is what I try to do. I'm sure the fans will enjoy the fight. I feel real good." Tyson arrived at the convention centre on the night of the fight, still unnoticed by the general public. But that comfortable situation was destined to change quickly. Within a few months, his face would become familiar to most boxing fans, thanks to a massive publicity campaign masterminded by his managers. But in May of 1985, he could still walk the streets without being recognised. He had increased the number of people in his unofficial retinue since his last visit to Albany, however. Not only was he accompanied into the arena by his 3 trainers, but he was also followed in by 2 admiring blondes. After his usual warm-up period in the locker room, Mike headed to the ring, decked out in white trunks and white shoes. Halpin was waiting for him, anxious to get it on. The Catskill teenager was also anxious, but he fought under more control in this fight than he did in the first 2. He seemed to be maturing a little bit more with each passing month. As round 1 got underway, it was apparent that Mike respected Halpin's ring experience and his reputation as a scrapper. He didn't rush across the ring to meet his foe as he'd done in his previous 2 fights. This time he approached his man cautiously and tried to follow Cus's pre-fight plan. Cus wanted Mike to work his man inside with an intense body attack in order to open him up so he could get a clean shot at his chin. Mike followed Cus's instructions to the latter. In round 2, he kept boring in, punishing Halpin to the body. In round 3, he suddenly switched his attack to the head and brought the crowd to his feet with a sharp left to the side of Halpin's face, followed by a sizzling right to the cheekbone. These punches signalled the beginning of the end for the Massachusetts fighter. Although Halpin survived the round, the success that Mike had in getting through his guard only served to increase his confidence level. If there was one thing that Mike didn't need, it was more confidence. He rushed out of his corner in round 4, looking for the knockout. A flurry of punches put Halpin in immediate trouble, and a dynamite left hand sent him to the canvas for an 8 count. As soon as the referee waved the 2 fighters together again, Tyson was back on the attack. In the centre ring, the Catskill clubber caught his man with a right cross, staggering him. A left broke through Halpin's guard once again, and a follow-up left sent the Irishman reeling backwards across the ring. Mike ran after his man and landed a paralysing right uppercut that snapped Halpin's head back violently as he collapsed into the ropes. The Boston fighter bounced off the ropes, landing face first on the floor, where he lay motionless for 5 minutes. The referee finished the count of 10 at precisely 1 minute and 6 seconds, but he might as well have just counted to 1,000. Halpin didn't hear a thing. Mike became part of a family now, but he was also becoming financially independent thanks to his earnings in the ring. The Catskill teenager had wanted to build a pigeon coop in the front yard of the Ewald house for several years. Now, with Cus's blessing and Camille's permission, the youngster was given the go-ahead. He quickly recruited several of his buddies, and with their help and an ample supply of plywood and chicken wire, he constructed a small wooden structure along the banks of the Hudson. As soon as he hammered in the final nail, the boyish Mike set out to stock the coop with a large family of his cherished street rats. It was a happy day for him when he placed the first pigeon in its new plywood home. At long last, he had everything he wanted. He was part of a loving family. He was being given the responsibility due an adult. And he had a new family of babies to take care of, his first flock in over 5 years. For Mike, it was just a great feeling to be alive. As the days passed, Mike was forced to step up the pace in the gym. With his next fight less than a month away, June 20th to be exact, he had to get in peak condition quickly and stay there. His new schedule consisted of a 5-mile early morning run, 2 hours of gym work, and 4 or 5 rounds of sparring. And it was relentless. Every day. 7 days a week. Cus, Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton met in New York City in late May and decided to make a change in promoters. Tri-State Promotions had been unable to provide the kind of publicity that Mike's management committee felt was necessary in order to properly promote their product. Therefore, Bob Arum, one of the top promoters in the country, was brought into the picture and took over the arrangement for Tyson's upcoming fight. He immediately scheduled it for the Resort International Hotel in Atlantic City on the undercard of the nationally televised Jesse Ferguson and Tony Anthony bout. It was even possible that Mike would get some television exposure if the main event ended in a quick KO. Some people in Mike's camp were not too thrilled to learn that Bob Arum would be the promoter. His reputation was not exactly untarnished around the boxing world. Arum, at the time a 52-year-old New Yorker, had been schooled as a lawyer at Harvard University, but a subsequent business project for the Internal Revenue Service soon convinced him that an enterprising young man could make big money in promoting prize fights. Bob Arum was a workaholic, and for several years spent every waking hour negotiating with a multitude of managers and fighters to promote their bouts. His big break came in 1962 when he became acquainted with Muhammad Ali, then Cassius Clay, and started to promote Ali's fights. After Ali was stripped of his title for refusing to fight in Vietnam, Arum arranged a deal with the WBA and ABC TV to promote an elimination series to find a worthy successor to Ali. Over the years, Bob Arum's power has grown, but many people in boxing's inner circle have come to despise him. He has been labelled a liar, a cheat and a double-crosser, yet fight managers still deal with him. That's the way it is in boxing, even today. The man with the best deal gets the match. Sunday, June 16th was a special day in the life of Cus D'Amato. It was Father's Day. On that day, Mike presented him with a Father's Day card, the first time that Mike had ever done that. Cus was truly touched, and it was something that he would always remember with misty eyes. Cus never married, but on this day, he became a father. 2 days later, Kevin Rooney packed the station wagon with the necessary boxing gear, and the four-man crew set out for Atlantic City, a 5-hour drive. He found things in turmoil when they arrived at the seaside resort. Mike's opponent had run out on the bout, and with the fight less than 48 hours away, they needed an opponent quickly. The volunteer was Ricardo Spain, small for a heavyweight at 184 pounds, but aggressive and hungry, and better still, available. Cus was once again concerned about the small size of Mike's opponent, but Spain was very strong in the upper body. His thin legs accounted for most of the lack of the weight, and Cus figured that Spain would come into the ring and run in order to survive a few rounds. The Tyson-Spain fight was the first bout on the card. Spain surprised everybody by coming right at Mike, who met him in centre ring. The tiny heavyweight threw the first punch, a left hook, but Mike moved his head slightly and slipped it easily. Then the Catskill Clubber began his own offensive. A thundering overhand right found its mark on the side of Spain's head, stunning the smaller fighter. He fell forward into Mike, then collapsed backwards on the floor. Although dazed and hurt, the gutsy little fighter dragged himself to his feet, barely beating the 10 count. Tyson was right back on the attack, backing his man into a corner, where he unleashed a barrage of short, powerful punches. The kid from Catskill threw a left, blocked a right, and then countered with a thundering right hand that snapped Spain's head back. A pouring left, another hard right, and still another right crashed against Spain's face. The referee jumped in as Spain's knees sagged, and he caught the stricken fighter before he could fall. It was Mike's quickest knockout yet, with only 38 seconds off the clock. The Tyson team was very upbeat after the fight, as you would expect. Cus D'Amato was beginning to beat the drum for his rapidly improving fighter. He said, "He's got great potential. Outside of Larry Holmes, the heavyweight contenders are a mediocre lot. Pinkland Thomas is probably the best of the lot, but the best fighters are the ones who are up and coming. Tyson, Henry Tillman, Tyrell Biggs." Rooney was also so excited about the quickness of the knockout that he could hardly contain himself. "He's ready to step out," he said. "He's beginning to do things instinctively. We're going to fight again down here." When Mike was asked how he liked fighting in Atlantic City, he just shrugged his shoulders. No big deal. I feel more at home fighting out of town. I fought all over the world in the amateurs. When I fought in Albany, that was the first time I ever fought in my own area. Bob Arum crashed the scene and moved around the locker room yelling, "He looked awesome! Awesome!" But it was left for former middleweight champion Jake LaMotta to get in the last word when he encountered Cus D'Amato. The Bronx Bull congratulated him and said, "Cus, it looks like you have another world champion in that boy." Mike's Atlantic City debut was a smashing success. Even though the fight was not shown on television, the ESPN cable network was determined to televise Mike's next fight. The live crowd at Resorts International took the young slugger to their hearts immediately, and the hotel was anxious to get him back soon. Everybody associated with the fight card was talking about the unknown sensation from New York. Mike was a hit. Bob Arum, taking advantage of Mike's sudden impact on the Atlantic City scene, scheduled another bout only 3 weeks later. This time his opponent was a tall white boxer named John Alderson, and the bout was televised live by ESPN from the Trump Casino Hotel. This fight marked the actual beginning of star buildup for the Catskill phenomenon. Between Jim Jacobs, Bob Arum, and ESPN, they set out to make Mike's next fight an event. The fight would also mark Mike's first experience at fending off media representatives while trying to concentrate on his opponent. An ESPN film crew arrived in Catskill, New York on July 2nd to do a special on Mike and Cus D'Amato, a razzle-dazzle piece of filmmaking that would be shown on the cable station just prior to the Alderson bout. The commentators and camera crew spent the better part of the morning around the award residence and journeyed to Redmond's Hall to catch Mike in the midst of his training routine. Somehow training went on as normal, a manner as the situation permitted. Cus tried to entice Tom Sullivan back to serve as Mike's sparring partner again, but he had prior commitments. This left Mike in a not so unusual predicament, stuck in the gym without a sparring partner. Mike made the best of it as usual and concentrated on the other aspects of his conditioning, the bag exercises, the calisthenics and the road work. Mike was beginning to feel the pressure by fight night. He was fighting on the undercard, but he was, in reality, the main attraction. He was getting all the publicity and was being offered all the interviews. It was a lot for an 18-year-old kid to cope with, but he handled it with unusual maturity. John Alderson, all 6'5" of him, hailed from Cabin Creek, West Virginia, and he came into the fight with the same professional record as Mike, 4-0. Alderson had turned pro after compiling a tremendous 154-12 record in the amateurs, but as he entered the ring, he looked a little soft around the middle, a dangerous condition for a Mike opponent to be in. The fight got off the mark slowly. Alderson looked like a guy who just wanted to last 6 rounds, not win the fight, and he kept backpedaling just out of Mike's reach. Mike pursued him, but refrained from throwing wild punches. He was intent on looking for a good opening. A Tyson jab bloodied Alderson's nose near the end of the round, and a left-right combination coming out of a clinch did more damage. In round 2, the opening came. At 1 minute and 42 seconds of the round, Mike finally caught Alderson with a stinging left, opening a small cut over the West Virginian's eye. Another left dazed the big heavyweight, and a follow-up right hand dropped him for an 8 count. Back on his feet again, he was fair game for the pride of Catskill, who moved in for the kill. A 1-2 left-right combination did the damage. After absorbing the 2 vicious blows, Alderson pitched forward and Mike obligingly stepped aside, allowing him to fall to the canvas. He rolled over into a sitting position and stayed there until the bell sounded, ending the round. Between rounds, referee Frank Cappuccino and the ring physician examined the battered fighter, and Cappuccino gave the young man some sage advice. "John, church is out. The fight is over. Come back and fight another day." Mike's record now stood at 5-0, with 5 quick KOs. At the post-fight interview, Mike admitted that the pre-fight hype had bothered him slightly. He said, "I felt a little funny because of the star build-up. It felt a little intimidating." On Saturday, July the 19th, Mike made his 6th pro appearance in the ring, this time in Poughkeepsie, New York. The programme in the Mid-Hudson Civic Centre featured the Catskill Clubber and Larry Sims, a chubby black boxer from Cleveland. Sims, a 30-year-old club fighter with a 10-10 record, approached Mike very cautiously and stayed out of harm's way for the first 2 rounds. At the beginning of round 3, Mike trapped his man in the corner and delivered a series of crushing body shots. As soon as Sims dropped his hands to protect his ribs, Mike caught him with a clean right hook and put him in Never Never Land for a full 10 minutes. Cus was duly impressed with Mike's quick ending. He said, "A fighter, once he hurts his man, takes him apart. He opens up with everything. The ability to finish a man is what makes Mike exciting to the crowds, but he still needs more experience. He needs to go to the body more." Cus never let Mike get complacent. He always found an area where Mike needed more work, and he always commented on it to let Mike know that he wasn't perfect, that he still had work in hand in order to improve his skills. Mike's bank account was beginning to grow substantially now, but he was very frugal with his money. He did afford himself one luxury, however. When he got back to Catskill, he rushed out and bought a used car, a snappy-looking Cadillac Eldorado, white with a blue top. At 18 years old, Mike was already a seasoned professional boxer, but as one of his boxing buddies at the gym recalled, his driving expertise did not match his ring prowess. When he first took the caddy out for a road demo, the car salesman sat frozen in the front seat as Mike bounced over the curbstone and careered down the highway, seemingly out of control. Mike was thrilled to ride, but the salesman was traumatised. After several minutes of sheer terror, he insisted on driving the car back to the lot himself. In spite of the man's lack of confidence in Mike's driving capabilities, the teenager was noticeably impressed by the performance of the vehicle and purchased it for his very own. It was his first sizable acquisition. The fancy car made a big hit with his buddies around Catskill, but it was obvious from the outset that Mike was not the world's greatest driver. Mike's misadventures on the road scared the hell out of his manager. He was sure that Mike would kill himself someday. Not only that, but Mike himself didn't enjoy driving that much, so it was just a matter of time before the experiment died under its own weight. Mike had also accumulated 4 driving violations in a relatively short period of time and was grounded by the New York State Registry of Motor Vehicles. It was one of the happiest moments in Cus's life when Mike told him that he was selling the car. Cus slept easier after the car was gone. Mike's professional career was becoming a blur since the initiation of the new publicity campaign. His fights seemed to come one after the other in rapid-fire succession. The days and weeks between the fights were filled with business obligations as well as his rigorous training responsibilities. Newspaper reporters by the dozen sought him out, and his manager Jim Jacobs was most obliging. Anybody who could get Mike's name in the newspapers was welcomed in Catskill with open arms. But when all was said and done, the fight was the thing, and the fight must go on at all costs. After sparring with Carlos De Leon in Catskill for a couple of days, Mike was matched against another old pro in the gym, James Broad, rated number 4 by the IBC. Brought his 16-4 professional record to Redmond's Hall. Broad, who had been in with the likes of terrible Tim Witherspoon and Marvis Fraser, stopped over for 7 days to stretch Mike's skills a little further. After Broad departed, the Tyson group broke camp and made the long trek down to Atlantic City, this time to take on Lorenzo Canardi at Resorts International. People questioned Canardi's credentials as an opponent, but as Cus explained, "We don't ask about records anymore. We just thank God we have an opponent. I know the fans would like to see him fight top contenders, but that doesn't make any sense yet. We can't make any money doing that. First, Mike needs to establish a reputation, and then we'll take him to the top fighters, maybe in a year. In the meantime, we can get the experience fighting them in the gym." The Canardi fight was short and merciful. 20 seconds after the bell sounded, Mike's left put the tall, lean Ohio fighter down on one knee in his corner, wondering how he'd even gotten into such a mess. 15 seconds later, the two adversaries met in centre ring. They both missed haymaker rights simultaneously, but Mike followed up with a left that found Canardi's jaw, buckling his knees. The Detroit fighter seemed to hang motionless in space for an eternity and then slumped to his knees and fell over on his side for the full count. It was another electrifying knockout for Mike. The entire proceedings lasted only 58 seconds. In his first 7 professional fights, the kid from Catskill had laboured in the ring for only 25 minutes and 27 seconds, slightly more than 1 round per fight. The truth was that Mike was getting more competition in the gym than in his actual official fights. In addition to Carlos De Leon, James Broad, Tyrone Armstrong and Tom Sullivan, Mike had traded blows with the likes of Carl the Truth Williams, Tyrell Biggs, Jimmy Young and Frank Bruno. Needless to say, it was a picnic when Mike stepped into the ring against his nondescript opponents, if and when he could even find a nondescript opponent. Mike's next scheduled fight on August 20th was cancelled when 5 possible candidates pulled out rather than step into the ring with the Catskill Cruncher. Finally, Mike, Jack Johnson, a cruiserweight who had been inactive for over 2 years, volunteered to face the Catskill Assassin. He should have stayed inactive. As Channel 10 News in Albany reported, Mike attacked the body immediately and a left hook to the liver area put Johnson down for the first time. As soon as he arose, Mike was after him. Rooney was yelling from the corner, "The 8-2, Michael, the 8-2. Mike got the message. The 8-2 manoeuvre, a right hook to the rib cage followed by immediately a right uppercut to the jaw, was executed with pinpoint precision, and Michael Jack Johnson was history, another victim of the New York hitman. The total elapsed time for that fight, 39 seconds, and the loser was on his way to hospital for observation. On Friday, September 13th, Cus D'Amato travelled to Albany, New York to address a sales meeting at a local investment company. The subject of the talk was positive thinking, something that many people think was invented by Cus during his years in the Gramercy gym. The talk eventually got around to his young ward, Mike Tyson, a subject that Cus loved to talk about. He said, "Now, I have presently a young fighter, a fellow by the name of Tyson. You must have heard of him already in this area. Tyson will be a champion of the world, and the only thing that will stop him is if he allows anything to interfere with his objective and dedication." Cus's voice was raspy during the talk, causing him to clear his throat frequently. It was the first symptom of the insidious illness that would take his life less than 2 months later. Cus's final battle with death was another vivid reminder that boxing was, after all, only a sport and not a microcosm of life. But Cus believed he had done his job well. He believed he had prepared Mike for every eventuality, including his impending death. Cus had put Mike on the track to the championship, and he believed that Mike had developed the necessary independence to continue on his own after his adopted father was gone. As Tyson's regime continued, the heavyweight championship was changing hands. On September the 21st, Michael Spinks, an inflated light heavyweight, took the title away from an over-the-hill Larry Holmes. It was a dull 15-round affair. Spinks wouldn't fight and Holmes was too tired to fight. When Mike saw the debacle, he told the Daily Mail, "I'll fight him right now. That fight disgraced the heavyweights. Spinks is only a light heavyweight. It's unbelievable. He should give me a title shot right now." Cus D'Amato was a little more cautious. He said, "Mike has 5 more fights scheduled, and then we'll see." With visions of heavyweight championship belts dancing in his head, Mike Tyson took a new oath of dedication to his profession. He said, "I want respect. That's what it's all about, to get the respect of everybody. No more kills, no more nightlife. I'm going to show everybody." One night, Mike was taking the garbage out, and Cus was cleaning up the kitchen. Cus said, "Man, I wish you had a body like Mike Weaver or Ken Norton, because then you would be really intimidating. You'd have an ominous aura. They don't have the temperament, but they have the physique of an intimidating man. You could paralyze the other boxers with fear just by the way you look." Mike got choked up. To this day, when he recounts this story, he still chokes up. Mike was offended and hurt, but he wouldn't tell Cus that, because then he'd say, "Oh, you're crying? What are you, a little baby? How can you handle a big-time fight if you don't have the emotional toughness?" Anytime Mike showed his emotions, Cus despised it, so Mike held back the tears. "Don't worry, Cus." Mike made himself sound arrogant. "You watch. One day, the whole world is going to be afraid of me. When they mention my name, they'll sweat blood, Cus." That was the day he turned into Iron Mike. He became that guy 100%. Mike wasn't completely emotionally invested in being the savage that Cus wanted him to be. After that talk about Mike being too small, he became that savage. He even began to fantasize that if he actually killed someone inside the ring, it would certainly intimidate everyone. Cus wanted an antisocial champion, so Mike drew on the bad guys from the movies, guys like Jack Palance and Richard Widmark. Mike immersed himself in the role of the arrogant sociopath. Once again, Mike's career was slowed by a lack of qualified adversaries. A scheduled bout in the Felt Forum was called off when the opponent took a powder after concluding that the $700 payday wasn't worth the pain and the suffering that he would experience in the ring. Subsequently, Mike's next fight was moved to Atlantic City, where the larger $1,500 purse would entice more opponents out of the woodwork. After several frustrating weeks, an opponent and a date was finalised. Mike's adversary was to be Danny Long, who had replaced Tony Anthony, who had replaced Dion Simpson, and the merry-go-round continued. It was impossible to tell Mike's many prospective opponents without a scorecard. It was easy to keep track of his sparring partners. There were none. As a result, Mike was forced to take out his frustrations in the ring by pounding away at Kevin Rooney's big catcher mitts and by working over his body bag. Mike also jogged his usual 5 miles a day. Even at this early stage in his career, Mike spent much of his free time promoting his hometown, getting involved in various anti-drug campaigns, and generally trying to be a model citizen. He had already learned to handle the media politely, no matter how aggressive or insensitive they might be. He said, "I can always afford to be a gentleman. I think everybody should. I'm a good guy, basically, and I want to help other kids go straight. Kids shouldn't be involved with drugs. They should be involved with academics, school and sports." On October 9th, Donnie Long brought a respectable 15-3 record and 10 KOs into the ring at the Trump Hotel and Casino. Although both fighters tipped the scales at 215 pounds, Long's 6'2" height made him look bigger than his stockier foe. Mike, attired in white shoes and trunks, had not yet assumed the intimidating all-black dress that would become his trademark as a top-rated contender, but Mike's approach to the fight was just as black and just as simple: seek and destroy. The fight, as usual, was short-lived and took longer to write about than it did to experience. Mike stalked his foe from the outset, and before a minute had passed he took command. As he manoeuvred his man back towards the ropes, Mike faked a right hand, then leaped in with a thundering left hook to the jaw that bounced long off the bottom strand of the ropes and onto the seat of his pants. The courageous kid from Youngstown, Ohio bounced up in a flash, but he was unable to stop the Tyson onslaught. The Catskill assassin came right at him as soon as referee Frank Cappuccino satisfied himself that Long was able to continue. Mike moved in quickly, his face a study in concentration. In centre ring, he unleashed a right-left combo that put Long in full retreat. A roundhouse left staggered the taller fighter, and another bounced him off the ropes. Rights and lefts rained all over Long's head. Two uppercuts snapped his head upright, and a crushing left hook put him down on one knee. The battered Long still insisted on continuing. It was a bad decision. Mike, beginning to show his youth and immaturity now, met Long in the centre ring and prepared for the final assault. The excited 19-year-old tried unsuccessfully to control his emotions. He threw a wild left that sailed 2 feet over Long's head. The two men wrestled momentarily, then a rapid-fire left-left combination by Mike found Long's unprotected right cheekbone. The Ohio boxer wobbled for a split second, then his body went limp and he fell backwards to the canvas. Still determined, he tried to sit up, but his glossy-eyed stare was proof that he could no longer function, and he collapsed on his right side, a beaten fighter. The referee rushed over immediately, waved off a count, bent down, and removed Long's mouthguard. Mike was still beaming at the post-fight press conference. He said, "Everything was timed. I was very calm and relaxed. I put in so much training and effort. As you can see, I'm a master at evading punches." At me, Rooney was equally happy with his performance. Michael passed his first test with flying colours. The beginning of the end finally arrived for Mike's manager, trainer, adopted father and confidant. In early October, Cus D'Amato was admitted into Mount Sinai Hospital, suffering from a painful upper respiratory problem. He never left the hospital again, as his condition gradually deteriorated and his 77-year-old body was unable to fight off the ravages of the disease. Mike spent as much time as possible at Cus's bedside, while at the same time preparing for his next test, another Atlantic City bout, with this one being Robert Colley. Like the 9 men before him, Colley was greatly overmatched. Mike was adorned in blue as he entered the ring on the night of October 25th. His adversary, a hometown kid who grew up within a stone's throw of the famous boardwalk, appeared nondescript in white shoes and blue and white trunks. When the fight started, the two combatants advanced to the centre of the ring. Colley threw a first punch, a left hook that Mike bobbed under. Mike returned left, grazed Colley's cheekbone, and then Mike moved forward again, bobbing and weaving, working his way inside, while Colley tried to keep him at bay with a series of weak left jabs. Another harmless jab at Colley was countered by a stiff left from Mike. Suddenly, the determined New Yorker unloaded his Sunday punch, an electrifying left hook thrown with perfect leverage and with all the animal ferocity that he could muster. It exploded against Colley's chin like a .357 Magnum, driving the New Jersey fighter backward to the canvas. The referee counted the fatal 10 count as the stunned Colley struggled vainly to regain his feet. It was a 37-second fight. The Tyson Express rolled on, without pause or reflection. Fight number 11 was confirmed for the Latham Coliseum the night of November 1st. The opponent was Sterling Benjamin, a chubby club fighter from Trinidad who had a misleading 11-4 win-loss record. Sterling's main claim to fame was that he had once gone the distance with the Olympic gold medal winner, Willie DeWitt of Canada, and had survived into the 7th round with another gold medalist, Tyrell Biggs. Promoter Lorraine Miller of Tri-City Promotions lamented the lack of adequate facilities in the Albany area to showcase the increasingly popular local heavyweight. Mike was rapidly outgrowing the cramped upstate New York boxing arenas. The Latham Coliseum seated only 3,000 people, and it was sold out within days of the Benjamin fight announcement, even with ticket prices ranging up to $20 for a ringside view of the spectacle. Lorraine Miller was looking ahead to future Mike Tyson fights. Possible sites that might still be large enough to house the growing number of Mike fans included the 8,000-seat Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute Fieldhouse, the Glens Falls Civic Center, and the Syracuse Carrier Dome. Once Mike outgrew those sites, his fights would have to be moved to the big-time locations like Madison Square Garden, Las Vegas, and Atlantic City. In addition to larger arenas, larger purses also became a reality for Mike. The asking price for Mike's opponents rose dramatically and now stood at $3,000 for an 8-round bout. The main event boys were asking $10,000 and upwards. It was strange to talk about 8 and 10 round fights when discussing the Catskill Clubber, since most of his fights were over before the first round. The Benjamin match was no different. Mike chased his man from the start. The Trinidad heavyweight tried to protect himself from Mike's power by keeping his chin tucked tightly behind his gloves and holding his elbows close to his body. But this was to no avail. 2 left jabs and a right to the head started Benjamin's downfall. A solid left hook toppled the big heavyweight at the 30-second mark. Benjamin managed to drag himself to his feet and immediately went into the famous Ali rope-a-dope in an effort to discourage his energetic assailant. But Mike was unmoved. He continued to pummel his man with a torrent of body punches, leaving the battered Benjamin gasping for air. A crushing left to the liver, a similar right hand to the ribcage, then a crunching right uppercut, 3 lightning-fast rights in succession, and 1 last left hook that dug deep into the fat of Benjamin's side, and the chubby one collapsed to the canvas, a knockout victim at 54 seconds of round number 1. The Latham Coliseum was in uproar as 3,000 fans jumped to their feet, whistling and screaming in celebration of another Tyson massacre. Cries of "We want Spinks! We want Spinks!" reverberated through the tiny arena. A legend was being born. Sterling Benjamin shook his head in disbelief after his battle with the Catskill teenager. He said, "Tyson hits like a sledgehammer, man. That's the hardest I've ever been hit." Mike and Kevin Rooney were both pleased with that performance, particularly Rooney, who said, "He's a cornerman's dream. I don't have to do any work. The work he's done in the dressing room. I think Mike is trying extra hard the last couple of fights in order to please Cus." The violent side of the sport was reflected in Mike's final comments about it. He said, "It was just a left hand to the right side of the body. I heard the crunching sound like click, click, click. I thought it was his ribs breaking." The fight and victory marked the beginning of Mike as a bona fide celebrity. Everyone in the sold-out arena was straining to pat him on the back to wish him well. "Way to go, champ," that's what he could hear as he was walking back to the dressing room. And also, people just wanted to get his autograph for posterity. A trailer belonging to a national television network was parked next to the Coliseum during the fight, and the TV crew recorded every second of the exciting event. After the final curtain, Mike was led outside the arena, so saturated with the sweat of his brief encounter. Inside the trailer, he was brought to a small interview room where he patiently answered every question thrown at him by an inquisitive interviewer. In spite of his thrilling victory, Mike's first thoughts were of his mentor and friend, Cus D'Amato. Early the next morning, Mike travelled to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York to update his teacher on his most recent fight. Cus was growing increasingly weak now, and it was becoming obvious that this might be the final round for the cagey-old boxing manager. Mike tried to comfort his adopted father, while Cus, on the other hand, constantly talked to his young protege to prepare him for the inevitable. Cus had brought Mike a long way along the road of life. He had taken a young hoodlum from Brooklyn and transformed him into a model young man. Along the way, he probably also created a heavyweight boxing champion, but strangely enough, that was less important to Cus than developing a good human being. Cus said, "If something should happen to me, Mike, if the time comes when I'm not here, you'll be all right. I've taught you to be independent, and now you're ready to be on your own. Just remember all the things we talked about, and someday you'll be the heavyweight champion of the world. As long as you don't allow anything to distract you, you will be a success." Mike usually left Cus's bedside in tears, trying to cope with the possibility that the old man would soon be gone. Kevin Rooney, another successful D'Amato project, was also trying to cope. He said, "Michael and myself included are holding up well. There was one day I think it was bothering him. Cus believed in mind over matter. I think he's been fighting this for a long time. Now he's critical. It's a rare case of pneumonia affecting not only his lungs, but the tubes leading to his lungs." As the days passed, Cus gradually slipped into a coma, leaving his fighter desolate and depressed. November the 4th, 1985, was the saddest day in the life of Mike Tyson. A pivotal moment in his life. His strong backbone, Cus D'Amato, passed away at precisely 4:30 p.m. from the ravaging effects of the intestinal pulmonary fibrosis. Mike and Camille were alone in their grief, and they tried to find solace in each other's arms. The tears flowed uncontrollably in the old house during the week-long vigil for the departed head of the family. But relief was a long time coming. The old woman, and the young boxer particularly, would feel the emptiness of the old Victorian mansion for many long months. Cus's family, friends and associates, along with dozens of scruffy street kids, converged on Catskill, New York, to pay their last respects to the venerable trainer. Following a service of Christian burial at St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church, Cus's remains were interred in St. Patrick's Cemetery, escorted to the graveside by 8 somber bearers, including Mike, Jay Bright, Floyd Patterson, Jose Torres, Jim Jacobs and Kevin Rooney, Tom Patty and Cus's brother Jerry. The former light heavyweight champion Jose Torres gave the eulogy for his friend and mentor. He said, "While some people were obsessed with money, power or fame, Cus's obsessions were decency, integrity and compassion. He treated his boxers like his own children, and I was one of them. Cus left us with a valuable legacy. Not the obvious and superficial world championships, but rather he taught us to be better people. He taught us to become better teachers. He was a fighter to the end, and he retired as a champion." Once Cus was laid to rest, Mike's quest for the championship resumed, just as the old man would have wished. A major challenge loomed immediately on the horizon. During the second week of November, the Tyson entourage travelled south to Houston, Texas, where his next stumbling block, Eddie Richardson, lay in wait like an old-time desperado. Richardson was attempting to re-establish his once promising career. He, like Mike, started out impressively in the pro ranks, winning his first 12 bouts, but in 1985, the bottom fell out. He suffered 2 consecutive defeats, including a nationally televised knockout at the hands of flashy newcomer Tyrell Biggs. Now it was the moment of truth for the 6'6" Texan. This fight would determine whether he could pull himself together and become a logical heavyweight contender again, or would he just become another opponent for young fighters on the way up. It was also a tough situation for the teenage Tyson to be thrown into. He was facing a determined opponent who was intent on regaining his lost promise, and he himself was in no condition emotionally to participate in an event of this magnitude, having buried his mentor and friend only 6 days prior. This is what Mike said about Cus's death in his autobiography. "When Cus died, I just didn't care about anything anymore. I was basically fighting for the money. I didn't really have a dream. It would be good to win the title, but I just wanted to get some wine, have some fun, party and get fucked up. But first, I needed to fuck up Richardson." Mike sat alone in his hotel room on the day of the fight. He had brought a photo of Cus to Houston with him, and he sat fondling it, tears running down his cheeks as he tried to concentrate on the task at hand and to remember all the things that Cus had taught him, all the things he would have to do in order to win. He clutched the photo tightly, hoping it would somehow give him strength. When evening came, he carried Cus's picture to the dressing room with him, again looking for some magical transfer of power from Cus's image. He sat hunched over on the bench for what seemed like an eternity, his head in his hands, and he squeezed the photo one last time as he contemplated the challenge ahead. Both fighters appeared nervous as they entered the ring, but Mike Tyson, with Cus behind him, was calm and determined by fight time. Kid Dynamite Mike wanted to win this fight for his mentor, and he was driven by an unstoppable force. Eddie Richardson never had a chance. He would have had to bring the Texas judges into the ring to hold Tyson while he hit him in order to win that fight. Wearing black trunks and shoes for the first time, perhaps in mourning for Cus, Mike looked like death and destruction as he stood in his corner waiting for the bell. The fierce look on his face, a look that would become a Tyson trademark, sent shivers up the backs of ringside patrons. Perhaps Richardson was too intimidated. In any event, only 9 seconds into the fight, Mike's right hand sent the tall Texan to the canvas. Mike was hell-bent on mayhem. He continued to stalk his man when the fight resumed, eventually backing the Texan into a corner. Mike unleashed a right that grazed Richardson's temple. Then he went into a crouch and came up right up with a torrid left hook that caught Richardson flush on the chin, felling him like a tree. Referee Barry Yeats hovered over the prone Richardson and told the fatal count. 8, 9, 10. Mike rushed over to the fallen fighter as the count reached 10 and helped his battered adversary to his feet. The timekeeper's clock read 1 minute and 17 seconds. It was a great win for the Catskill teenager, his first step on the road to independence and self-sufficiency. Cus D'Amato was gone, but his legacy lived on. Mike was beginning to grow up. He was maturing rapidly inside the ring and out. Soon he would be ready to tackle the rated fighters in the division. In just 3 months, he would meet ESPE champion Jesse Ferguson, Then his star would soar heavenward in a hell-bent for election rush to glory. The Catskill man-child hardly had time to take a deep breath before his next fight was on him. 9 days after the Richardson bout, only 18 days after Cus's death on November the 22nd, Tyson climbed through the ropes at the Latham Coliseum to trade punches with a tall Jamaican fighter, Conroy Nelson, the number 2 Canadian heavyweight behind Willie DeWitt. Nelson expressed confidence that he could derail the Tyson Express. He said, "A shorter man always has a lot of problems getting in on a taller man. A tall man who can box and who can use his reach to good advantage will give the smaller man trouble." Mike, as usual, sounded almost blasé about the upcoming battle. He said, "I'm going to go out there and put the pressure right on and see how he reacts from the first round onwards. If he's still around after 4 rounds, maybe we'll change our strategy, but probably not. Most likely the pressure's going to be on for the full 8 rounds. I never anticipate a knockout. I always expect the fight to go the distance. Knockouts just seem to come." The tenor of the fight was established early in round 1. Mike was on the attack, stalking his man from the outset. Conroy Nelson, on the other hand, wanted to feel Mike out to see how hard the youngster could punch. The big Jamaican didn't want to get involved in a slugging match early in the fight. He maintained good lateral movement throughout the round, staying just out of Mike's reach. His hands were held high against his cheekbones and elbows were tucked in against his body, protecting his ribcage. He offered little in the way of offense in round 1, content just to get through the round. As round 2 began, Mike was out of his corner like a big cat. He feinted with the left and then shot a straight right that broke through Nelson's guard, catching the taller man on the chin. Now hurt, Nelson forgot his fight plan and went on the offensive. He threw a left that missed its mark, and in the process, he left himself wide open. Mike immediately capitalised on the mistake, delivering the coup de grace, an explosive left hook to the point of the chin that sent Nelson sprawling backwards to the canvas, and for the full count. The fight had gone only 30 seconds into round 2. This was Mike's first fight in the Albany area without Cus D'Amato, and he missed the old manager deeply, particularly at this time and in this town. After a quick shower, Mike left the Coliseum with some of his buddies and headed for the local pizza joint for some refreshment and relaxation. Mike stayed out on the town all night, making the rounds of his favourite Albany haunts, seemingly searching for something that just wasn't there. The youngster arrived back in Catskill as the sun was coming up, and he went directly to Camille's room for comfort. He sat on the edge of a bed, and the tears were rolling down his face. "I did good in the fight, Camille, but I was lonely. Cus wasn't there. Everybody tells me I do good, but nobody tells me if I do bad. It wouldn't make any difference how good I did. Cus would always find something I did wrong. I'm trying to get Cus's death out of my mind, but it's difficult. I used to talk to him before every fight. Now when I start to get nervous or scared, I have to deal with it myself." Mike returned to the gym 2 days after the Nelson fight to work on some of his weaknesses. He had only 2 weeks before he was scheduled to fight Sammy Scaff in New York's Felt Forum, so he was force-fed Kevin Rooney's condensed course in boxing strategy. To help Mike master his new lessons, another experienced heavyweight was brought into Catskill for 5 days of sparring. David Bigfoot Johnson out of Baltimore had been in with some of the top names in the division: Witherspoon, Snipes, Tubbs and Cooney. Mike and his team practically lived in the Catskill gym for 1 solid week, then packed their bags and set out for New York City to finish the training in Gleason's gym in the shadow of Madison Square Garden. Gleason's gym was a throwback to the old days when dingy, dimly lit athletic clubs were the focal points of urban America. It was a typical smoke-filled school for pugs, where the sweat and pungent odour of liniment permeated the atmosphere. 2 rings dominated the room, and a quick look around at the 15 or so fighters who were busy working on the trade identified them as primarily Hispanics and African Americans, the usual street kids who were attempting to punch their way out of the big city ghetto. Mike was prepared for his match with Sammy Scaff, under the dim fluorescent lights of Gleason's. James Broad was there to make sure that Mike stuck to his guns and concentrated on the basics. Kevin Rooney was draped over the top strand of the ropes, a la Cus D'Amato, yelling instructions to his fighter. "Work on the jab. Cover up. Protect yourself. Faster. Use combinations. Don't throw just 1 punch at a time. That's good. Keep punching. Now practice the jab, straight and sharp." The sweat poured off Mike's body like a September downpour, but his breathing was imperceptible, a sure sign that Mike was in tip-top shape. After completing 5 fast rounds of sparring, Mike moved on to the heavy bag to improve his stamina and punching leverage. Mike worked hard to control the big bag, much like he would if he had to control an opponent in the ring. On a Friday night, December the 6th, 1985, Mike would be ready for war, and Sammy Scaff had better be at his rough, tough best. For the Tyson camp, Scaff was just one more stepping stone to boxing immortality. The scene of the fight was the Felt Forum, the smaller sister arena to Madison Square Garden, located in the heart of metropolitan New York. Prestigious galas were staged in the garden, while the Forum was used for the run-of-the-mill boxing cards. The Forum, seating 4,500 people, was the site of most New York City bouts, now primarily the popular but poorly attended club fights. The garden had fallen into disfavour with the boxing entrepreneurs, who usually opted for Las Vegas to stage the championship bouts. Over the last 10 years, Vegas and Atlantic City had replaced New York as America's boxing mecca. But on this night, the Felt Forum was Mike's stage, and his already burgeoning reputation filled the arena to capacity. Sammy Scaff was the first one in the ring, dressed in black trunks and blue shoes. The balding 6'4", 250-pound Kentuckan looked old, fat and out of shape. His hairy body, blurry build and moustache gave him the appearance of a lethargic walrus. When Mike entered the ring, he was all business as usual, and the embodiment of a lean, well-muscled and well-conditioned gladiator. He eyed his large, fleshy opponent with a look of disdain. Scaff, just coming off a brutal beating at the hands of Tim Witherspoon on national television, looked awkward and inept as he tried to keep the determined Mike at bay. Mike advanced on the brawny Kentuckan, quickly driving him into a corner. A straight right hand smashed against Scaff's nose, spewing blood over his milky white body. Fighting for survival now, the chubby heavyweight threw a wild left in Mike's direction. The kid from Catskill weaved effortlessly to the left, and the punch passed harmlessly over his shoulder. A return right by Mike caught the top of Scaff's head, and a follow-up left uppercut snapped the big man's head back. Scaff backed off and threw out a stiff left that missed the mark. Mike missed the left. Both fighters missed with uppercuts. Scaff missed yet another left hook. Mike ducked under it and came back with 2 left hooks of his own that landed with full force against Scaff's jaw. Scaff's arms immediately dropped to his sides. His head slumped down on his chest, and he pitched forward on his face in a neutral corner. Miraculously, he pulled himself upright at the count of 9, but the vacant look in his eyes told everyone that the match was over. The referee wrapped his arms around the beaten fighter and called halt at 1 minute and 19 seconds of the first round. A concerned Mike rushed to Scaff's side to thank him for a valiant effort. As Sammy Scaff recovered on the table in the dressing room, he told the press, "I've gone 4 rounds with Tim Witherspoon, and I've been in the ring with Greg Page, but I've never been hit that hard in my life." Tyson, for his part, was a matter of fact about it when he said, "I was trying to connect with a good shot to the body, but it was a bit awkward, and after I hit him in the nose, he was wary of my punching power. It was difficult to get to him because of his height." When he was asked what he liked most in life, Tyson replied truthfully, "Being alone." Being alone was something that would be harder and harder to do as his celebrity increased. He was quickly changing from a private person to a public figure, a personality whose life would never again be his own. Within a period of 1 week in December, Mike was featured in several articles in such acclaimed journals as Ring Magazine and the New York Times. His boyish face adorned the cover of the prestigious Sports Illustrated, and the even popular television show Today escorted the young fighter to their studios, where he was interviewed by Bryant Gumbel. The interview centered around Mike Tyson's drive for the heavyweight championship of the world and his life without his mentor and confidant, Cus D'Amato. The American public was exposed to Tyson, the person, for the first time. He came across on television as a typical 19-year-old kid, shy and unassuming. Life was beginning to move at a dizzying pace for the teenage slugger from upstate New York. His schedule was completely filled every day. If he wasn't fighting or training, he was suffering through interviews or photo sessions or appearing on local or network TV shows. On December the 27th, Mike climbed through the ropes in the Latham Coliseum to take on foe number 15, Mark Young from Charlotte, North Carolina. Young, unlike Scaff, was a competent young boxer in tip-top physical condition, a fighter capable of giving Mike a run for his money. But as usual, the Catskill clubber was ready. What was expected to be a long, tough fight turned out to be a short sojourn in the ring. Mike came out of his corner with a look of intensity in his eyes. The two fighters exchanged punches in the centre of the ring until a Mike right cross jarred the Carolina fighter and sent him flying backwards across the ring. He bounced off the ropes onto his face like a rag doll and lay motionless for several minutes. The fight had lasted exactly 50 seconds. The look of intensity was still on Mike's face as his gloves were removed and the gauze was cut away from his hands. According to Mike, the fight had no special meaning. He said, "Boxing is just a business to me. It's a job. I don't enjoy it. It's just a job." If it was just a job, it was a hell of a job. And Mike Tyson was doing one hell of a job at it. His record showed a total of 15 fights in 1985, 15 victories, all KOs, 11 of them in the first round. In his 15 pro fights, Mike had laboured in the ring for a total of only 37 minutes and 21 seconds, an average of 2 minutes and 29 seconds or less than one round per fight. 1985 was a resounding success for Mike. His professional debut was electrifying, and his relentless advance up through the professional ranks was unmatched in boxing history. The promoting of Mike was also unparalleled in the annals of the sport. Manoeuvred adroitly by his co-managers and marketing geniuses Cus D'Amato, Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton, Mike's boyish face appeared to be everywhere. CBS Evening News did a feature on him. So did NBC Nightly News and Good Morning America. Sent in a limousine to Catskill at dawn one day to escort the young slugger back to Manhattan for a 7:30 interview with host David Hartman. Mike obliged everyone, but he was already beginning to yearn for his rapidly disappearing privacy. He said, "I don't like the intrusion. I like being alone. Talking to the press is not important to me at all. I'm still 19. I'd like to hang out with my friends and have a kid's life. Be a little wild now and then. I can't even talk to a girl without everyone knowing." The year 1986 was to be Mike's road to the title, the year when he would challenge the top pretenders to the throne and dismantle them one by one. That was the plan. But before Mike would be turned loose on the top-ranked fighters, his managers had one other goal for him to reach first: Rocky Marciano's knockout record. Marciano had KO'd his first 16 opponents in the professional ranks, and Mike's record now stood at 15. Jim Jacobs wanted to break that record before turning Mike loose to make a run for the gold. Opponent number 16, the man who would allow Mike to tie Marciano's record, was Dave Jacko, a tall, frail-looking white boxer fighting out of Bay City, Michigan. Jacko, at 6'5" tall, carried a deceptive 215 pounds on his lanky frame. Although he brought a respectable 19-5 record into the fight, the Michigan fighter was considered no more than another stepping stone for the new heavyweight sensation. The Empire State Plaza in Albany, New York was jammed to the rafters on the night of January the 11th. A standing room only crowd of 3,000 screaming Mike Tyson fans were on hand to witness his attempt at the KO record. Mike entered the arena carrying his usual small canvas gym bag long before the crowd arrived, and was followed to the dressing room by 3 pigtail blonde admirers. Dave Jacko, another of Mike's journeyman opponents, was not concentrating on a victory on this night. His objective was to only go the route with the new heavyweight sensation. Even that would be difficult, according to Jacko. He said, "It will take sheer will to keep up for 10 rounds. The impatient crowd began their usual rhythmic hand clapping and foot stomping. They were understandably anxious to see the dynamic heavyweight in action and to participate in a small segment of ring history. When Jacko finally made an appearance and headed down the aisle to the ring, he was greeted with a generous round of applause from the congregation. Moments later, the building shook with tumultuous cheering as the crowd caught sight of the burly Mike leaving the dressing room. The kid from Catskill forced his way down the crowded steps, accompanied only by his trainer Kevin Rooney and his cutman Matt Baranski. Every person in the arena was on his feet, screaming and whistling, some standing on their chairs to get a better view. When Mike climbed through the ropes, his face was solemn. His eyes were fixed in a dark stare as he prepared himself for his next hurdle. He was unclothed as usual. Save for his white boxing shoes and white trunks, he wore no socks, he wore no robe. He once again, the gladiator, entering the arena to do battle to the death. Jacko was visibly agitated at the sight of the muscular adversary. He tried to keep Mike at distance once the fight started, but he was not strong enough to prevent the aggressive 19-year-old from bullying his way inside. Jacko appeared to be wary of his notorious opponent, and he punched ineffectively off his rear foot while backpedaling away from the advancing Mike Tyson. Jacko stuck a jab in the kid's face to keep him at bay, but Mike walked right through it. Jacko missed with a right, Mike had him in the corner now, and he dropped the outgunned Michigan heavyweight to his hands and knees with a stinging left hook. As soon as Jacko regained his feet, Mike backed him into another corner, and another left hook buckled his legs. He crumpled to the canvas in a heap as Mike watched and waited. Although Jacko's talent was non-existent compared with Mike's, his heart was big, and he once again struggled to his feet. The game Midwesterner tried to stay out of harm's way, but it was impossible. He managed to avoid one Tyson left, but a follow-up clubbing right hand to the top of the head sent him sprawling again, face first to the canvas. The referee jumped in and stopped the fight immediately, invoking the mandatory 3 knockdown rule. It was over, mercifully in the first round, and Mike had equalled the record of the legendary Rocky Marciano by KOing his 16th straight opponent. Mike was all low-key and all business at the post-fight interview. He said, "It's just a business. Jacko is a professional. He lost because of the 3 knockdown rule, but if there was no rule, I didn't catch him right, he would have kept getting up, and I would have had to keep knocking him down 10 or 15 more times." In January 1986, Tyson's celebrity status grew significantly larger. After tying Marciano's knockout record, he began attracting the media like honey attracts bees. The January issue of Sports Illustrated carried a cover photo of Mike with the caption, "Kid Dynamite." The accompanying article called him the next great heavyweight. That was just the beginning of the hype. It would grow to unbelievable proportions by the end of the year. The final test of Mike would not be how great a fighter he was, but how well Cus D'Amato had prepared him for the pressures and the demands of stardom. The major concern of Tyson's managers was not whether the young slugger could reach the top, but rather how he handled it once he got there. The major TV networks were beating a steady track to the Manhattan offices of Big Fights Inc. to talk to Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs about their fighter. Everyone wanted a piece of him. ABC TV was the first network to cough up the big bucks, putting the teenager under contract for 4 exclusive fights in 1986 at a cost of $850,000. Mike was well on his way to making his first million. Kid Dynamite was back in the ring, this time in Atlantic City. Mike's opponent was Irish Mike Jameson, a 31-year-old pro from Cupertino, California. Mike's manager Jim Jacobs was not happy when he learned that Jameson was substituting for Phil Brown, who had to withdraw with an injury. Brown was a superbly muscled fighter, but one well suited to Mike's brawling style. Jameson, on the other hand, was known as a survivor, a tough Irish kid who had carried several rated fighters into the later rounds. The statistics on the two fighters gave Mike a decided advantage. The kid from Catskill was younger, stronger, and faster than his more experienced adversary. Physically, he was as solid as a rock, built like a finely chiselled Greek statue. Jameson, carrying 236 pounds on his 6'4" frame, had a height, weight, and even reach advantage. But the California heavyweight was soft around the middle and had little foot speed, 2 attributes made to order for a young bull like Mike. On fight night, the Trump Hotel and Casino, one of the many high-rise hotels that decorated the Atlantic City boardwalk, was crowded with boxing buffs anxious to get their first look at the new heavyweight sensation. The match was promoted by the Houston Boxing Association and was scheduled for 8 rounds, also televised live by ESPN. Irish Mike Jameson, true to his heritage, entered the ring, decked out in Kelly green trunks with a white shamrock. Mike made his appearance dressed in black once again. That colour would be his trademark from now on. Mike's managers thought black was an intimidating colour, and along with Mike's menacing sneer, the image that he presented would strike fear into the hearts of many opponents. Jacobs and Mike were convinced that the dark visage of the heavyweight executioner would win many fights before the first bell had even rung. And they were right. Jameson paced nervously around the 20-foot ring as he awaited the pre-fight festivities. Tyson was more composed, standing quietly in his corner, receiving last-minute instructions from Kevin Rooney. Referee Joe Cortez waved the two fighters to the centre of the ring to get the final instructions. A mustachioed Mike Jameson brought his 17-9 record with 8 KOs into the ring with him. He was soon joined by the man the media was now calling Iron Mike, perfect at 16-0. Mike's face was expressionless as he listened to Cortez, like a man deep in concentration. He didn't even acknowledge the cheers of the crowd. He was mentally preparing himself for the task at hand, that of destroying Mike Jameson. After the ritualistic handshake, the two antagonists returned to their respective corners to await the bell. The bell sounded, and the Catskill strong boy advanced to the centre of the ring to meet the journeyman from sunny California. An early right by Jameson caught Mike on the side of the head, but the youngster responded with a sharp right uppercut of his own. Mike stalked his man like a sleek jungle cat, weaving and bobbing, moving forward, always forward. Mike unleashed a short flurry on the ropes, but Jameson escaped serious difficulty. The constant diet of body punches was already bringing the big guy's hands down. Mike scored with a good uppercut and ended the round with a furious two-pronged attack to the head and body. Two hard rights to the head, one on top of the head that brought a grimace to his face and hurt Jameson, and he later said, "It felt like my neck went down to my belly button." In round 2, Jameson, the 1972 California Golden Gloves champion, landed a solid right to the side of Mike's head, but it didn't seem to bother him at all. The Catskill clubber came back with a fist body attack, always moving forward. He didn't take a backward step the entire fight. A sharp uppercut opened up a deep gash over Jameson's left eye, causing blood to flow freely down the side of his face. Jameson's lumbering style made him a sitting duck for the swift Mike. He was unable to escape from Mike's withering attack, and he was frequently trapped on the ropes where the young New Yorker could bang away at will before Jameson could tie him up. The scenario remained unchanged in round 3. Tyson backed Jameson to the ropes at every opportunity and worked his body with dozens of rights and lefts, all of them thrown with bad intentions. The big heavyweight from Cupertino began to hold more often now as he realised his chances of survival were becoming slimmer with each Tyson attack. Mysteriously, the bell sounded to end the round at 2 minutes and 1 second mark. Mike Jameson probably appreciated the thoughtfulness of the timekeeper who got it wrong. In round 4, Mike continued to follow his fight plan. Jameson was warned for butting a couple of times early in the round, but that didn't slow down Tyson. The pride of Catskill quickly pinned the Irishman on the ropes, as had been his practice throughout the fight. A crushing left hook followed by 2 lightning left uppercuts dropped the Californian to the canvas in his own corner at 1 minute and 8 seconds of the round. The speed with which Mike put together 3 and 4 combinations was unheard of in the heavyweight division. He had the speed of a lightweight combined with the power of a heavyweight, a frightening combination for an opponent to ponder. Floyd Patterson had been credited with having the fastest hands in heavyweight history, but Mike was faster, according to the man who should know, Cus D'Amato. Jameson was on his feet quickly, shaking his head to clear the cobwebs, but Mike gave him no relief. As soon as the referee waved the two fighters together, the determined Mike rushed in for the kill. Jameson tried to tie up the rambunctious New Yorker, but with moderate success. The Cupertino heavyweight proved his toughness in this round by surviving an all-out onslaught by the frenzied teenager. Mike was out quickly in round 5 and immediately manoeuvred his man into a neutral corner. A hard combination followed by an overhand right put Jameson down on one knee. Referee Joe Cortez asked Jameson if he wanted to continue as he wiped off the big guy's gloves. Receiving no positive response after his third query, he stopped the fight. Mike was declared the winner on a TKO at 46 seconds of round 5, his 17th successive knockout. Jameson appeared to be frantic and distraught when Cortez calls it off, but boxing insiders claim that Jameson's tantrum was all a charade. According to those in the know, Cortez put the question to Jameson 3 times. "Are you alright? Do you want to continue?" Having received no answer from Jameson, the referee had no choice but to stop the fight, at which point Jameson finally responded, I'm alright. But as all boxers know, the referee can't think for them. It's the boxer's responsibility to let the referee know if he wants to continue or not. Jameson obviously didn't want to take any more punishment from Iron Mike. With Rocky Marciano's knockout record tucked safely away in his back pocket, Mike could now begin to move up in class. From now on, his managers would schedule world-class boxers. The final phase of his long, arduous and frenetic campaign towards the heavyweight championship was about to begin. From that day long ago, in September of 1980, when a scared 14-year-old street kid from Brownsville arrived at the Waldhaus on the banks of the Hudson, the major effort of Cus D'Amato, Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton was directed towards placing the young boy on the heavyweight throne sometime before March of 1988, a timetable that would make him the youngest heavyweight champion in history. D'Amato's boxing expertise, Jacobs' management skills and Caton's promotional talents were carefully orchestrated to produce the best world-class fighter in the world, a fighter who was known around the globe and a fighter whose image could demand multi-million-dollar purses whenever he fought. The countdown had begun, and Jesse "Thunder" Ferguson was first on the list. Ferguson was the ESPN champion, rated number 16 in the world. He carried a record of 16-1 with 10 KOs into the ring. His only loss was a 10th round knockout at the hands of Carl the Truth Williams, and he had Williams on the canvas twice before his luck ran out. The fight would be a major hurdle for the youthful Mike Tyson and would determine if he was ready to handle the top contenders. Outside the ring, Mike was getting a taste of what it was like to be a celebrity. He completed his first television commercial in January, a 30-second slot for an Albany, New York electronics store. Tyson was shown throwing punches at the air while an unseen voice said, "Heavyweight Tyson, Mike Tyson, is tough on the competition." At the end of the pitch from the electronics firm, Tyson pointed to the camera and said, "We knock out competition." At least it was a start. Also outside the ring, the boxing community was formulating a plan to unify the heavyweight title for the first time in more than 6 years. Early in 1986, there were 3 men who all claimed to be the true champion. First, there was Michael Spinks, probably the closest thing to a true champion there was. Spinks was recognised as the title holder by the International Boxing Federation, and then there was Pinklon Thomas, the WBC champion, and Tim Witherspoon, the WBA king. In truth, nothing more than pretenders to the throne. Boxing promoters Don King and Butch Lewis, under an umbrella called the Dynamic Duo, after months of difficult negotiations with HBO, announced the details of an elimination tournament to crown a unified champion. The scenario had Tim Witherspoon fighting Englishman Frank Bruno in March, Michael Spinks defending his newly won IBF crown against former title holder Larry Holmes, and Pinklon Thomas putting his WBA title on the line against Trevor Berbick. The WBC and WBA winners would then unify 2/3 of the title with a box-off in November, while the IBF champ defended his title against the European champion Stefan Tangstad on the same card. Finally, early in 1987, the two champions would meet in the final unification bout to crown the one true heavyweight champion. There was many talented heavyweights that were excluded from the tournament, including Jerry Cooney, Carl Williams and Mike Weaver, and their managers were screaming foul and talking about collusion and deals in the national regs. Mike was also ignored when the tournament was engineered, but that was as it should have been. Mike was coming on strong, but he still didn't have the credentials to qualify as a serious contender. He was close, however, as witnessed by the fact the HBO Vice President for Sports, Ross Greenberg, made the trip from Manhattan to Troy to study the new heavyweight sensation firsthand. Although Mike's mentor, Cus D'Amato, was no longer around to choreograph his career, his co-managers, Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton, were still grooming him very carefully. Mike's opponents were still handpicked, and his rate of progress was monitored meticulously. His schedule would not be accelerated just to satisfy the whims of Don King and HBO. When Mike's time came, he would be ready. As Jim Jacobs told HBO, "Our chief responsibility over the past year has been to select the right opponents for Mike. Nothing else has been more important. When people watch Mike fight, we want them to leave the arena saying, 'When can we see him again?' And that's where Bill and I are scrupulously careful in determining who he fights and the style of fighter." Jesse "Thunder" Ferguson walked into the ring and was welcomed with a smattering of applause from the pro-Tyson fans. Ferguson climbed through the ropes with a confident smile on his face. He looked well, warmed up and ready to go, and his pre-fight comments to ABC were brought to mind once again. He said, "I think I can beat Mike Tyson. I'm going to stand there and fight him. I won't run. I think my experience and my punching power will win the fight for me." Perhaps he was right, but there were 7,600 people in attendance who were of the opinion that if Ferguson stood toe-to-toe with the Catskill assassin, he would leave the ring on his shield. The buzzing that filled the arena during the minutes immediately preceding the fight suddenly erupted into a deafening roar as the pride of New York emerged from the dressing room. He was not yet in full sight of the crowd, but already the rafters reverberated with thunder as the fans screamed, whistled and stamped their feet and began the rhythmic chant, "Tyson, Tyson." If the roof had separated from the building as a result of the welcome for their hometown hero, not one person in the building would have been surprised. Ross Greenberg, Vice President of Sports for HBO at ringside, looked around incredulously at the wild scene. He said he'd never in his life witnessed such an enthusiastic welcome for an athlete. Mike stood quietly in his corner, while his trainer laced on the 8-ounce thumbless gloves that are mandatory in the state of New York. Rooney then spread liberal amounts of Vaseline around his fighter's eyebrows and cheekbones as a normal precaution against cuts. The lubricant reduces the friction on a fighter's face, allowing an opponent's glove to slide off his face harmlessly instead of grabbing the skin and opening a nasty wound. In the process, it doesn't prevent all cuts, but it does minimise those caused by friction. When Tyson was formally introduced to the crowd, another wild demonstration was ignited. A group of enthusiastic Tyson fans at ringside stood and waved place cards to the crowd, glorifying the hero's professional achievements. One man held a card aloft reading, "Fight 1 KO, another fight 2 KO, another fight 3 KO, and so on, all the way up to fight 17. Mike didn't acknowledge the roar of the crowd at the time, although he later remarked, "It was great, but I like to hear my name announced, you know." As referee Luis Rivera gave the fighters the final instructions, Alex Wallu at ringside summarised the importance of the fight for television viewers. He said, "Tyson is stepping up from fighting journeyman fighters to fighting a quality opponent. The heavyweight division right now is in chaos with 3 champions. If Mike Tyson is for real, he could be the star that this division and this sport needs very badly." Mike's emotions appeared to be under control as fight time approached. He calmly bounced up and down in his corner, pounding his gloves together in anticipation. At the bell, his placid countenance suddenly changed. A cloud came over his face, and his expression turned dark and sinister. He was once again the gladiator, and he was kill or be killed in the arena, with no quarter asked or given. Mike was a man on a mission, and his mission on this day was to club Jesse Ferguson into submission as quickly as possible. Mike met the ESPN champion in the centre of the ring and immediately manoeuvred him into a neutral corner where he exploded 6 vicious body punches to the ribs and liver area. 5 more body shots were delivered with bad intentions. Ferguson tried to fight back, but his single punch was drowned out by a Tyson avalanche. 2 thundering rights dug deep into Ferguson's side. The round was only a minute old, and already Ferguson had taken enough body shots to last an entire fight. 2 dynamite left uppercuts straightened the lanky Ferguson up and forced him to respond with 4 or 5 punches of his own in sheer desperation. Mike brought 3 more crushing lefts up from the floor to crash against Jesse's liver area. Lesser opponents would have already called it a night against Mike's onslaught, but Jesse Ferguson was no average fighter. He was a cut above Mike's previous opponents. Mike's attack became more varied now, as he shifted from body punches to occasional lefts and rights to the head that stunned Ferguson. The round was less than half over when the 2 tremendous left hooks found the side of Ferguson's face. Mike had already thrown 40 or 50 punches in this fight, and every one of them was designed to maim or kill. Ferguson landed his first good punch of the fight, a short right uppercut that snapped Mike's head back. The action continued at rapid-fire rate for the rest of the round, with Ferguson fighting back, but Tyson still landing the more telling blows. Rounds 2 and 3 were fought on the ropes, with Tyson manoeuvring for position and Ferguson trying to keep the Catskill strong boy at bay. A crushing right uppercut thrown by Ferguson found Mike's chin, but Mike's only response was a counter-attack of his own. In round 4, Ferguson was able to keep Mike at arm's length. As a result, most of the action took place in the centre of the ring. Mike became more tentative in this round, perhaps beginning to pace himself for a possible 10-round match, perhaps just looking for that one big opening. There was a minor fracas at the end of the round when Mike landed a hard right to Ferguson's body after the bell. The infraction inflamed Jesse and caused his handlers to leap into the ring, but order was quickly restored before things got out of hand. As round 5 started, Ferguson came out boxing and jabbing more than at any time in the fight. Mike didn't throw a punch for almost a minute, choosing instead to stalk his man, biding his time and wait for a clean shot. Several times Mike had the ESPN champion backed into a neutral corner without throwing a punch. Once again, he pushed Ferguson's body against the ropes. This time a flurry of body punches brought Ferguson's guard down, which is exactly what the kid from Catskill was looking for. A Mike left uppercut connected, but with not much on it. That was followed by a hard right to the ribcage, then a lightning right uppercut that broke Ferguson's nose, snapping his head back and driving him back against the ropes. The big man's knees buckled, his body crumpled, and he pitched forward to the canvas. He rolled over on his back and lay motionless, his hands held high as if shielding his eyes from the lights. His smashed nose spurted blood. Tyson was an eerie sight as he turned away from his fallen foe and walked slowly to the neutral corner. His hands were straight down by his sides, and a strange, almost evil leer covered his face. Mike explained the reason for his reaction to Paul Post of the Daily Mail after the fight. He said, "I was laughing because when you know something's going to happen, it's amusing." Jesse Ferguson survived that punch and escaped another 30-second pummeling by Mike to end the round. But the former Marine from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, was still not fully recovered when round 6 started. He tried to give himself time to clear the cobwebs by holding whenever Mike moved in close, a tactic that brought several warnings from the referee. Rivera had difficulty separating the two fighters on several occasions, and when Ferguson continued to grab and hold in the defiance of his directives, Rivera had no choice but to stop the fight, disqualifying Ferguson and awarding Mike a technical knockout at 1 minute and 19 seconds of the round. In interviews after the fight, Tyson insisted that Ferguson's tactics didn't discourage him. He said, "They can't beat me by hitting and holding. It's a 10-round fight and sooner or later, I'm going to get him." Asked why he changed his tactics after the first 3 rounds, Mike volunteered and said, "In the 4th round I was watching his shoulders and watching the punches he was throwing so I could counter them. At the end of the 4th round I saw an opening and I knew I was going to hit him with an uppercut and finish him." Alex Wallou noted that Mike didn't appear to be winded at all after his 6th-round battle, and he also noted that Mike had taken some good shots from Ferguson without any noticeable ill effects, 2 areas that the critics were leery about. Mike just shrugged off their doubts and he said, "I can't change any opinions. Perhaps some people still have doubts about me, but as I continue to win and to meet all the contenders in the near future, then I will quiet all doubts." Ross Greenberg was another who considered Mike's achievement to be monumental. He hurried back to his HBO offices greatly impressed with the new heavyweight challenger. He immediately informed his staff that it was almost certain Mike Tyson would have to be included in the heavyweight unification tournament before it reached its final resolution. Negotiations was ordered to begin at once with Big Fights Inc., and after weeks of discussions between the two parties, Jim Jacobs made the monumentous announcement. Big Fights Inc. had just concluded a package deal with HBO that would put $1 million in Mike Tyson's pockets for appearing exclusively on HBO in 4 fights during the upcoming year. Coupled with the ABC offer, Mike was assured of earning almost $2 million for 8 matches in 1986. The date was March 19th. The Tyson camp still had not committed their valuable property to the heavyweight elimination tournament, but they had made assurances to the HBO Don King group that they would continue to negotiate through the summer and would make a final decision by Labor Day. During this period, Mike began driving automobiles again, his license having been returned by the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Mike had spent the previous year being escorted around in a bright new chauffeured limousine, placed at his disposal by his manager Jim Jacobs. Now he could chauffeur himself around again. He didn't rush out and buy a new car this time, however. Remembering his previous experience, he was more cautious this second time around. One of the Catskill City administrators owned a yellow Cadillac convertible, and he put the car at Mike's disposal from time to time. Mike got a lot of use out of that yellow caddy during the summer of '86. He was spotted driving all over the North Country, from Albany, New York, to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Many days he drove the caddy up to Catskill High School to visit Mr. Stickles, Mr. Turek, and some of his favourite teachers. Occasionally, he took a bunch of the high school kids out for a joyride. Mike was a hero to most of the teenagers in Catskill, and he delighted in the adulation and the responsibility. He was still a big kid himself, and he loved to impress the youngsters, and it was hard to believe, but he was only a year or 2 older than some of them. Being a celebrity was not all fun and games for the teenage idol, however. There were always people searching for the dark side of a public figure's life. An article in the Boston Globe accused Mike of using lewd and obscene language to female patrons in an Albany department store. A security guard at the mall also stated that Mike and several of his friends were asked to leave the local cinema for cursing at customers. True or not, it created reams of adverse publicity on the sports pages of the nation's newspapers. Articles like this one made Mike painfully aware of the tremendous impact his actions could have on his life. He was no longer just a private citizen. He was now a public figure, and as such would spend the rest of his life in the journalistic fishbowl. The eye of every reporter and the ear of every freelance journalist would be on him continuously from now on. His smallest transgression would be noticed, and it would be magnified and twisted beyond recognition by the purveyors of sensationalism, and elaborately displayed to the world on the cover of one of the weekly scandal sheets. Mike had only 3 weeks to prepare for his next opponent, journeyman Steve Sowski, a scheduled breather strategically slotted between two name opponents, Ferguson and James Quick Tillis. But Mike Tyson was still experiencing growing pains at this time, still maturing emotionally. His mind continued to play games with him, telling him that he could coast through certain matches without giving a full effort and without preparing for the fight properly. Such was the case with the Sowski match. Mike didn't train with his usual zest, occasionally skipping a day completely, and, on other days, engaging in half-hearted sparring sessions with Charles Tombstone Smith. In Mike's juvenile mind, Sowski was a stiff who didn't have to be taken seriously. He confided to a friend, "He's nothing, I can beat him easily." As a result of his confused thinking, fight day found Mike mentally unprepared for battle. To make matters worse, he fell off his pigeon coop in the morning, damaging his cartilage in his ear and laying the foundation for a full-scale infection. To Mike's dismay, the Sowski bout was a lacklustre affair from start to finish. Mike exhibited few of the skills that had vaulted him into the top 10 in the WBC's latest ratings. He seemed to be fighting in a daze, throwing far too few punches and getting hit far too often in return. The 6,000 Tyson fans that crowded into Long Island's Nassau Coliseum began to wonder what was wrong with the Catskill assassin. True, Steve Sowski had gone 10 rounds with the current IBF cruiserweight champ Leroy Murphy, and his 25-10 record included 14 knockouts, but the Brockton, Massachusetts native was not around to see the 6th round against either Marvis Fraser or Tony Tubbs. His fleshy midsection was ample proof that his conditioning program left something to be desired. Tyson contented himself with working Sowski's soft middle during round 1, leaving a series of bright pink welts wherever his thumbless gloves made contact. Mike landed several telling uppercuts in round 2, but took a number of hard shots in return, uncharacteristic of a mentally prepared Tyson. As round 3 got underway, Kevin Rooney grew impatient with his charge, at one point yelling, "If you don't start punching, this bum will go 10 rounds with you." Perhaps Mike heard his trainer's admonition. Perhaps not. In any case, he suddenly unloaded the big artillery. A left hand followed by 2 whistling rights staggered his courageous foe. Another right hurt Sowski, and one final powerful left hook that smashed against the right side of his face sent the challenger to the canvas face first for the full count. Referee Arthur McCanty counted the dazed Sowski out at 2 minutes and 49 seconds of the round. According to Kevin Rooney, Tyson rated a C+ for his effort, but based on the questions and answers at the post-fight press conference, most journalists and even Mike himself gave the Catskill boxer a much lower score. Mike admitted that it was his worst performance ever, saying that he was suffering from a cold and that he had a lot of personal problems. Within 3 days of the Sowski fight, Mike was back in the gym, sparring with Mark Machain and Tombstone Smith, readying himself for the Tillis fight, only 16 days hence. Mike was forced to don the unaccustomed headgear in order to protect his injured ear, which was becoming more irritated with each passing day. The following week, Mike was the recipient of a prestigious honour, official recognition by the New York State Legislature. Mike and his trainer Kevin Rooney travelled to the state capital at Albany on Tuesday, March 19th to receive the honour. Assemblyman C.D. Larry Lane introduced Tyson to the legislature, and Assembly Speaker Stanley Fink presented the young boxer with a framed resolution. It read in part, "It is the sense of this legislative body to publicly recognise and commend Mike Tyson, an individual of singular and truly compelling distinction, for his outstanding professional career." With all the adverse publicity that Mike had received in recent weeks, it was questionable whether or not he could live up to the accolades he'd just received. But fate entered the picture at this point and gave the New York teenager a much-needed break in his grueling schedule. The ear infection that had been developing since the Sowski fight suddenly hit Mike with a full force, sending him reeling to the hospital for 10 days of rest and treatment. It forced a postponement of the Tillis fight until May the 3rd, 1987, and gave the belligerent 19-year-old time to re-examine his recent escapades and get his head back together. He thoughtfully reviewed his behaviour and his attitude over the past few months. His recent frivolous nighttime activities with people who were supposed to be his friends, but who in fact turned him away from his objective and caused considerable consternation in the Ewald household and in the offices of Big Fights Inc. Headlines and the nation's sports pages refer to nights away from home and a girl a night and lewd behaviour in public places. As Mike rested in the hospital bed, he utilised his convalescence to his full advantage. He redirected himself to the goal that he and Cus had first set back in 1980, and that was to win the heavyweight championship of the world. And it's at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we will break off for the end of part 3. I thoroughly hope you have enjoyed listening to the start of Mike Tyson's professional career. Crazy, isn't it? 15 fights in his first year as a professional. It's absolutely unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. Doesn't happen today. Very rare that it'll probably ever happen again, to be honest with you. But you also are hearing about signs of, since Cus has gone, there's obviously those weaknesses. That celebrity status is starting to already take its toll, and he's yet to become a champion. So, of course, in part 4, we will then explore his journey to the heavyweight championship of the world. That tournament, that specific tournament, which helps him go on to become an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And obviously more of his boxing career as we lead into the end of part 4. If you've enjoyed part 3, if you've enjoyed this section of his career profile, please do let me know on Spotify. If you're listening via the YouTube channel, leave a comment below. If you're on any other podcasting app and there is a comments facility, please make sure you leave a comment below. To those on Patreon who have had early access to this episode, thank you for subscribing to us, but please also leave comments about the episodes. I really do enjoy reading that. A big shout out goes out to Hassan, who works behind the scenes hard at BTR Central to try and get these episodes put together for us. He does an amazing job of putting together these episodes, and I'm really, really happy that he's on board with us, and I'm sure you guys appreciate him now too as well for all the hard work he's putting into getting such detailed insights into the careers of these legendary fighters and people that we're covering on this show. If you want to become a patron, you can do by checking us out at patreon.com. Have a look at the membership tiers on there. It is a nominal fee for subscribing to us, but it does help support the podcast, and it does allow us to go out there and purchase more things to help us put these episodes together. More literature, access to historical archives, things that people might not necessarily be able to find on the internet that you can actually get access to, that we can put into these episodes that make them just so much more in depth than your average Mike Tyson episode. So please, if you're in a position to do that, go and do that. But that is it. If you don't know where to find us, it's at BTR Boxing Podcast all over social media. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Mike Tyson, part 3 on the Career Profile podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you